So Jeff, before you, oh,
It's about to go. Alrighty, folks, we are back live again. So apparently movie reviews are not a thing that we can do. So we were shut down by Disney, which is all fine and good. So we're going to shift gears a little bit here and kind of tell a story to end out this week's episode. So Captain Miles, where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was aboard in command. Pride of Baltimore had been up in the Great Lakes for the summer of '01, and we were outbound from the Great Lakes. We were in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So the way it affected us was I have the ship at that time had two means of getting information. One was a direct email system that came that we would have to link to the satellite to get. The other was a force-fed notice to mariners system. And so I had already gone into the system of calling the satellite to get emails, and there were none. And that one day, 2001, 9/11. But later on, I had gone to the forced notice to mariners, and I noticed that the New York Harbor was closed. The captain of the port had closed New York Harbor. Now, for a captain, they didn't say why. They just closed it. That was the only information. There was no news, no other news. We were in the middle of the Gulf. There was no reason to think anything of it one way or the other. So I thought to myself, that was strange. And I checked around for a hurricane, and there was one like 100 miles plus away, not a very strong one. And I thought that was strange. It wouldn't have shut the harbor down. So I didn't think about it. Then the next day I connect with the satellite to get the emails, and there's this download of all this information. The office was closed, was thrown out of the World Trade Center back at the time, and the office was out. And the reason was because of the World Trade Center tragedy in New York and in DC with the Pentagon. And so I also got the new news download through Force. The forced notification had a subset for news, and it was only done once a day. So we finally caught up with it. And that's when it like, holy crow, wow, okay. So meanwhile, we're sailing. We're having a wonderful sail across the Gulf of St. Lawrence on schedule, just sailing along. I was anticipating the weather pattern such that we wouldn't be landing in Canada coming out of the U.S. side of the Great Lakes. We would expect to go nonstop all the way around to the U.S. again on the East Coast side. So I pulled out the shortwave radio to see if I could pick up a broadcast, and found on the long wave, not SSB, but long wave frequency, a Canadian news broadcast, and was able to start to get more up-to-date stuff. Called all hands to a meeting and said, okay, this is the situation, and asked if there's anybody with family that might be closely affected to the actual impact. And so we had a few crew members with relations near the DC area, so I was able to get back to staff via this email system while they were at home, and get them to do some calling around to notify the status of relations for some of the crew. And then next 5 days, maybe it was 6 days, we passed on through the Canso Straits, and we were sailing along the shore of Nova Scotia, and had the medium wave radio available. I was listening to it. Sometimes I would bring it on deck, sometimes not, because people just didn't want to hear about it anymore. was ongoing. So we got all the way to Provincetown nonstop, and we were able to get. We didn't have to do any clearing in, so there was no formalities. We just went from U.S. to U.S. because we didn't stop anywhere.
Yeah,
And
basically
so,
just went around Canada.
yeah, Eastern Canada. And so, and it was a lovely sail, but it was a surrealistic conversation because you're listening to the radio. Now, I wasn't personally cognizant of the lack of flying of commercial flights. I just didn't notice one way or the other about it. Heard about it, but not noticed it. And so I can't comment on that. But the business of a lot of email support from crew members that were associated, and of course my own. My sister was working at the Pentagon at that time when that plane went in there. So and Leslie. As a teacher, my wife Leslie, as a teacher, dealing with the fact that a lot of their students were military children, getting everybody back home again early. It cut the day short, and then getting home herself, and then trying to figure out the status of my sister on behalf of me, and then trying to keep me informed by email. So there was a lot of that going on until we could get ashore in the States. And we had, by that time, we had cell phone connection and landline connection. So, but it was almost like science fiction. You're reading a book, you're hearing a radio show, because we were so removed from the entire experience.
Oh, that's pretty wild. What was kind of the response and the dynamic of the crew? You said that some people had people that were in the area.
Yeah, but somewhat removed. Nothing really, really direct. More like an uncle, that kind of thing. And everybody was safe. Nobody was injured. Nobody was directly affected, other than they were on shore and had a more immediate sense of the tragedy because of the TV and everything else. So no, the crew were fine. They were sober. They were, in the sense of mature. They were mature about the whole thing. It was an out of body mind kind of experience because, like I said, we were so removed. It must have been like it was 200 years ago or 100 years ago, and I'm thinking about that big volcano explosion out in Asia, Krakatoa. At some point, people would hear about it, and then at some point they would actually maybe feel about it. And so it was just way distant from our immediate sense of what was going on. And the Canadian broadcasts were very, very sort of AKA public television or BBC kind of style. So it was very, very thought out, direct interviews with people, and so not sensationalized at all. So it was quite educational, quite informative. And so we were pretty informed by the time we got to the States, even though we didn't have the direct experience.
Yeah, no, that's pretty wild. Has there ever been any other kind of experiences where you've been out at sea and, something big has happened that you're just completely unaware of?
No, I think that's the one that stands out. I can't think of anything. I also, when we did the long distance voyages, I carried a shortwave radio on the ship, and I would dial in Voice of America or BBC around the world, and then as satellite technology came on, every once in a while, one of the forced pushed, Notice to Mariner type systems would include a daily brief, and I could read that, and if anything was significant, I could share with the crew. But the crew, we're involved with the sailing. That's what we're actually doing, and we're not so interested in hearing from back at home. Even in a Pacific crossing going 5,000 miles to Hawaii, or another 5,000 miles to Asia, or coming back from Asia, going to the Pacific Northwest. No, we're in our bubble. Talk about bubble. We're in our bubble. We like that bubble. We're happy with that bubble. We don't need to be reminded of all that stuff back ashore. So I can't think of another thing. If anything, it's us who create a little bit of shock and awe back at home with our stories of what happened. You know, the more dramatic one, of course, was the dismasting, and that was done by landline. But that's when you are the generator of the shock and awe rather than
right.
shock and awe. And blown out sail. Coming with the old boat, coming back from the West Coast, we lost the Jaboom. It broke out at the very tip. And so it was a radio call, because we didn't have the text forward system back in, that would have been in 83. So it was a matter of going on the high seas radio, getting the high seas AT&T operator to connect to the shore, and call them up and say, we got some bad news. So how are we going to do this? You want the big welcome home party when we get home. So we worked out a shipment of a squared off section long enough from Baltimore to Panama. And then we met the freight in Panama. The executive director was down to help make sure that it all came through. We were at a mooring over in the Pacific side of Panama. And so this freight had to be cleared through so we didn't have to pay taxes. And so it's on this forklift. And it's at the dock where the ship, it came off the ship that it came in through. So what do you want with it? The guy says in his Spanish. And I said, over here to the side of the dock. And I said, dump it in the water. And he looked at me. He said, really? So you got this, I don't know, 40-foot or 35-foot log. It's a squared off thing. You want it? He goes like this is Panama. It goes back and forth. I said, yes. And we had the runabout, because by VHF we could get the runabout to come over. And so the runabout met the thing as it falls in the water, tied a line on, and towed it out to Pride at a mooring, because we put it on deck, the usual way, 2 halyards. And we squared it up, and then 8-sided it, and then 16-sided it, and then finished it, and then got it installed about a week before we went into Baltimore. So all that time we were sailing without we kept the topmast and the yards. We were able to shore them back up again. And so we came in with all our glory, but it was better for us to do the shaping ourselves to make sure we didn't have a repetition of the weakness that had been built into the system before. And we wound up modifying the bowsprit cap a little bit, making it a bigger hull. And there's some photographs with an adze while the boat's sailing along, doing the rough cut before the first 8, doing the squaring first, and then doing the 8-side. And we had 3 carpenters and some novice carpenters, so we were able to do it on board. And but the look on the guy's face as this forklift, where do you want it? In the harbor.
It right here. I can imagine that's probably a story that he tells still. Awesome. Well, I think that'll do us for this week's episode of Coffee with Captain. Apologies for getting cut off earlier. We will be doing another episode next Saturday of Coffee with Captain. So look for announcements of what that's going to be. And thank you for anybody that's donated. Appreciate that a lot. That helps keep us running. Thank you to Patrick for helping get everything set up and working as far as we got it. So appreciate that. And Captain Miles, do you have any parting words for us?
Please stay diligent.
All right. Thanks, everyone.